Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional from Bangkok, Thailand, Mr. Peter Cauwelier. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ashutosh.
Peter is the founder of TEAM.AS.ONE, which is an independent consulting, keynote speaking, and facilitation business. He created the Team Psychological Safety Certified Practitioner program. So, Peter, let's start by asking you the first question. Tell me about your own journey as a team coach and what inspired you to create TEAM.AS.ONE.
So I had a corporate role at a multinational company based both in Thailand and then North America. And my last job with them was to have regional responsibilities. But then I was looking for something else, a new challenge. And that's when I ventured out on my own. And from the beginning, I was intrigued by the concept of teams. Now, I'm talking about 14 years ago when I left corporate. At that time, we didn't talk about team coaching that much. That has changed a lot since. But I was intrigued by the concept, the notion of teams, right? What makes a team like gel and really sync, whereas for others, it seems like you're pulling teeth. So from the beginning, I was interested in the idea of a team, whether that's in a manufacturing business like I was part of or any other environment. And how can we make those teams that we have in all organizations more efficient and more tools of both innovation and engagement for the members of that team at the same time.
Amazing. And what was the key turning point that led you to focus on psychological safety in teams?
Well, I did when I left my corporate role, I did embark on a PhD adventure where I wanted again to explore the idea of teams and team learning. So my key word was team learning. What makes that teams learn versus others don't learn? And that's where I, doing the literature review and a bit heavy in academics, that's where I came across the terminology for the first time at that time of team psychological safety, which had been identified by Professor Edmondson a few years prior. And so team psychological safety is not the only one, but it's one of the key drivers of team learning. And that's how the journey started. I used team psychological safety as part of my PhD research, but then also very much so outside of the academic field.
Amazing. Tell me, how does TEAM.AS.ONE differ from the traditional team coaching methodologies that exist all over?
That now exist all over, indeed. There's a lot of team coaching out there. I would say a few things. First of all, team coaching is often perceived, when you just look at the team coaching part, as we're going to have to make the team work better, to make people more comfortable working in the team. And I twist that a little bit. I say it's first and foremost about performance. It's about what this team can deliver. That's what every organization, every leader wants. It's performance, it's delivery, it's innovation. So I say coaching, yes, maybe a pathway too, but the ultimate goal is performance, innovation, delivery. And I would say the second thing is that I sometimes have the impression that when we are coaching a team, we like to refer to, those dream teams, very often from sports environments. And we put the bar very high. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm putting the bar low, but I put the bar there where the team can really feel that it's in their line of view. They can reach that particular bar in the next 3 months or 6 months. And then we move from there. So I'm a big believer in going it step by step rather than going for the big bang.
Well said. Great response. You also talk about existing team culture as a starting point. Why is it essential to look at team culture as a starting point to drive meaningful change?
Yes, so it's a kind of connected with what I just said earlier. I can show you videos of the greatest team in the world. There's books that have been written about it. And that creates great goals and hopefully inspires people. But I'm a bit of a realist. It's one thing to be inspired, but if that inspiration does not lead to some concrete action tomorrow, then I don't call that very useful. So I don't think too much about the goal in a first stage. I first say, where are we today? Where is the team today with all its strengths and maybe struggles? And that's where we start from. A team always has things that they're doing very well, and they always have things that they can be doing better. And I always start from this and then try to move forward based on what we can diagnose, what we can discover as the main issues right now.
And how would you define psychological safety in a team setting, given that there are multiple members of a team and they could all be at different levels?
Yes, well, thank you for that question, because I think that's one of the big, let's say, misunderstandings or misplaced simplifications that are being made on this topic. It's become a bit of a buzzword, as you may have noticed, right? Psychological safety. Now, I only talk about team psychological safety, and I'm lucky, Ashutosh, because I don't have to come up with a definition, because somebody has done that before us. Professor Edmondson, in her pretty well-known work from already 25 years ago, if you believe it, she has identified team psychological safety as follows. It's the shared belief by the members of the team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So it's really a team concept. Yes, people within the team have different personalities and energies and motivations, but team psychological safety is something that we measure as a team construct, as something that lives positively or not so positively at the level of the team.
And why is psychological safety often the missing link in underperforming teams?
I guess it's, again, two thoughts on here. We all know about teams, right? I have never come across an organization that said, no, we don't care about teams, or collaboration is not for us. Every organization says we want collaboration, we want synergies, we want people to work together. That's one thing. But then how do you actually make it happen? There's not much out there. Basically, we say to leaders, you have to do this, you have to do that. There's not much help in getting there. And I think one answer that this model, this framework fulfills is exactly that. It's a way to get going towards that level of collaboration or better working together. Yeah, that's my first part of the answer.
And can you give me an example for my viewers and listeners on this whole subject of psychological safety, which may be missing?
So I'd say another element is that in organizations, Shutosh, and you've talked to many people, and I think you would probably agree with that, we're very used to look at two levels. We look at the level of the organization, right? And we talk about organizational culture, and there's people who are called OD professionals, organizational development professionals. And then we look at the level of the individual, and we have leadership development programs or trainings or what have you. We're not really used to look at the team as a unit, as something we can work with. And that is something that's missing. We kind of all want better team performance, but we expect that to happen either by looking at the organizational level or by looking at the level of the individuals. By creating great leaders, we then hope that we'll get great teams. And that's not always the case. And there's enough examples of that. Very often, it's both in the sports world and in the corporate world, you have great individuals, smart people, great in their field, and you put all of them together, and then you say, well, voila, there you go, that's my leadership team. Something's missing, right? That's exactly that part. It's what makes those people connect, what makes those people solve problems together. That is the key that is missing to go from a set of very smart individuals to actually a team that works and solves problems together.
Very interesting. Peter, you're also the creator of the Team Psychological Safety Certified Practitioner program. Tell me about this program and what led to the development of this program.
Yes, that's a mouthful. You got that very correct there. So going back to my PhD years, I did my PhD. I finished my PhD with team psychological safety as a key part of it. But then I also, because deep down I'm a practitioner, I'm not an academic, so I felt that there was a powerful concept that I has discovered, and I started to put that in place with teams I was working with. Actually, to be very honest, I measured the level of team psychological safety without telling the team. I was really in the early stages, right? That has changed now. But I said, just for myself, I want to measure this. I want to use this tool that I had come across in my academic work and use that to measure the level of team psychological safety in a particular team. I kept the results just for myself. And then I worked with that team over a number of weeks or months, whatever, and then we measured it again. And a few times I found very interesting, no, not a few times, every time I found very interesting results. I started to talk about those results at conferences with peers and networks that I'm a member of. And people said, wow, this is interesting. How can we learn more about this? And that was the starting point of me creating this program that's now 6 years old, that I think in about a few weeks, we will have reached 1,000 people who've gone through the program worldwide. It's not just me delivering it. And really, it's about helping people to do two things: to understand the theory, because in all the talk around psychological safety, very few people go back to the actual theory and the model. What is the definition? How do we measure it? Et cetera, et cetera. And then also make it practical. I'm an engineer at heart. No, not at heart, by training. So I like to get things done. So for me, when we just talk about something, that's okay, that's nice, but we need in the end to make a difference. And that's where the second, I think, importance of the program, to make it as practical as possible for the people that go through it.
Well said. Moving on now, Peter, how do you integrate action learning into building psychological safety?
Yes. So action learning is something I actually worked with before I was starting my PhD and I came across team psychological safety. So let's get the definition straight, because just like with team psychological safety, there's a number of definitions, right? So I've been certified and I work today as a WILE, World Institute for Action Learning coach. That's the model we use. And so basically it's a method to get a group of people, 6, 7, 8, solve a problem together. Now you may say, well, yes, okay, I've heard about this before, but the uniqueness is that we solve a problem not by saying what we should do, but by asking questions, about that problem. And actually, there's a ground rule in action learning, in the WILE form of action learning, that's for me is very powerful, is that statements can only be made in response to a question. You can only say something, state something, if somebody asks you a question. Just think about it. It's very powerful. It's not what we typically do. So I was very familiar with action learning. I'd been using it several times. And this dynamic of asking questions and then answering and then asking follow-up questions, etc., I had observed many times that, wow, something shifts in the team. It's not just about we're going to understand better about the problem and we're going to look for solutions for that problem, but it's also, I could feel like intuitively or subjectively that the dynamic amongst those people changed. And I often observed, even after we finished the session, people kept on chit-chatting, whereas typically they would just, go off and into their own work. And I that's where my light bulb went on. I said, this action learning process, maybe that is exactly creating that team psychological safety that I had then discovered. And that's also what I measured. Ashutosh, I mentioned you earlier, I measured. So I used action learning with a team and I measured team psychological safety before and after, and having indeed confirmation of my gut feeling that this process really brings people better together and creates this level of psychological safety in a team.
Thank you. What role does assessment or diagnostics play in your approach?
Yes, a big one. Team psychological safety. I'm sure if you Google for the word, you'll come across many people to say what it is, and they'll come up with their own definitions. Very few people talk about how you actually measure it. And again, I'm lucky because that's what Professor Edmondson did for us 25 years ago. She developed and academically tested the validity and reliability, an instrument to measure. Now, she doesn't ask people in the team, do you feel psychologically safe, right? Because that's a very loaded question. And I think what people would not really know what to answer about it. But she identified 7 elements, I call them elements, that really make up this thing called psychological safety. For an example, the first one is how people react to mistakes, right? In this team, if somebody makes a mistake, how do people react? Do they see it as a learning opportunity, or do they blame the person for having made a mistake? That's an example of one of the 7 elements. So when I work with a team, I do the standard survey. Basically, it's 7 questions, right? 7 elements, 7 questions. And the answers that each member individually gives anonymously, very important, anonymously, allow me to create a map. Actually, it's literally what I call a heat map, right? With red and orange and green. In the green, those of the 7 elements, maybe 2 or 3 of those elements that are the team's doing pretty good on, that everybody in the team seems to agree, yeah, when somebody makes a mistake, we react positively, we look for the learning. Going through the orange and then the red, and the red, obviously, that's those elements, some of the other of the 7, where team members say, well, we're not doing very well here, or we're not really supporting one another with this or that. For example, one thing is asking for help. It's another of the 7 elements. If team members would say, well, when I ask for help, I'm being shut down, people ignore me, etc., that element would then end up in the red zone. And so that's my starting point, Ashutosh. I create this, teams always love it, this red, orange, green map to show where each of those 7 elements pop up. And it's their answer. It's just I administered the survey. It's really their picture. So it's not like I tell them they're like that. This is just how their answers came together. And that's always a starting point. So rather than say, and this is an important point if I may, rather than say, oh, we have to improve the level of psychological safety, I will not talk like that. I will say, in this team, it seems that asking for help is a bit of a challenge. So what can we do to focus on this element and find better ways to ask each other for help and to support one another? And so it's not by making it a big fuzzy concept. It's about looking at those 7 elements, measuring them, and then identifying the actions, priority actions that help those elements that are maybe in the red or the orange.
Amazing. You almost answered my next question, but I'm going to ask you the question, then ask you for an example. My question is, how do you ensure psychological safety is not just a buzzword, but embedded into team habits? But you've answered part of the question. Give me an example of how you do it.
Yeah. And before I do that, allow me to say yes, and that's actually a constant struggle. I've already said before, it's called team psychological safety. It's not organizational psychological safety. You cannot talk about, if I work for a company with 1,000 people, I don't interact with 999 other people, right? I interact with the 10, 15 people that are in my team. So it's a constant challenge, to be honest, to make sure people are clear about what team psychological safety is and not. And an example, looking at the example of asking for help, I have a very simple tool. Some of the tools I created myself, some I picked up along the way as I moved through my career when I thought were useful. I call them help board. So it's basically making it clear that everybody in a team needs help from others in the team. And we're going to invite people to write down the topics they need help with. Topics related to work or topics outside of work. And they will create a little template, a little piece of paper, basically, where say, here's my name, Peter, and I need help with this. Now, the question should be directed to everybody. Everybody should be allowed to offer help for this. So that's the first step. Expressing a need for help, asking somebody for help. And that's already sometimes a bit of a challenge, but by doing it as a team, we kind of all do it together. I don't force you to ask a question. I say everybody in the team, and the dynamic creates a positive momentum where people say, oh, I've got these questions as well. That's the first step. The second step, obviously, is then once we post out or put up what a number of people need help with, the next part of the little leaf paper is then for people to offer their help. Now, may sound simplistic, and honestly it is, but guess what? People are not used to that because I'm in my department with my specialty and I focus on whatever it is, logistics, and I try to do the best. And when I'm stuck, I'm kind of stuck. It's strangely unnatural for people in a company setting to say, hey, you from finance and accounting, do you have some ideas to help me with that? So that little tool, I've seen it a few times, and it then becomes a regular team routine, right? We don't do it every day, but it becomes a habit. Somebody, once that it's been set up, then people know that if they have a new question or a need, or they ask for help, they put it on the help board, and it becomes a little bit of a competition for the team to get as many of those requests resolved as possible. So that's an example how, and yes, it has to be embedded in the way we do work.
Correct.
It cannot be something we do after 5 p.m. It has to be part of how we constantly work together.
Absolutely. Great response. And how do you create a psychologically safe space when cultural norms discourage speaking up?
Okay. Actually, believe it or not, I just finished a new blog yesterday. I typed around safe space, and I invite the users not to think about space. For me, when I hear about safe space, it sounds like we have the team, we have a situation, the team, the department, the company, and things are not going very well. And then we'll create something like a little bit of an add-on, like a bolt-on thing that then is safe. So all this is maybe not safe, but then we'll create something safe. And that, I think, is not the right approach. We have to make the work safe. We have to make it safe for people to take these interpersonal risks that I mentioned before, ask for help, or react positively to mistakes. So I don't, first comment is I don't really talk about space. So let's talk about the team. The second thing is, yes, you're right, cultures. Every culture is different. I'm from Europe, Belgium originally. I've lived in Asia and Thailand for a long time. We all know cultures are different. But I don't put culture with a big C on top of the team, Ashutosh. Here's my thoughts. Now, when I have a team with 8 people, 10 people, they can all be from the same culture, but they're all different, right? They may all be from India or from Thailand or from Belgium, but guess what? Not all of those people are identical. They have different educations, social experiences, challenges, or luck in their life, or lack of luck. So there's a lot of things that make up the people, and so the individuals of the team. And culture is one of them, but I would say it's only one of them. So, okay, we're 8 people, and maybe we're all from the same culture. How can we as a team, the 8 of us, not the whole country, not the whole company, but how can the 8 of us do better together? And when it comes to speaking up or asking questions, in some countries, well, they come up with different solutions, right? In some countries, they just can say, well, we're all going to, whenever you have a question, raise your hand and shout out your question. In other cultures, that doesn't work. But then the team comes up with a way that works for them. Maybe they prefer to, I don't know, write it down anonymously, if that's the case. So I invite the team to look for the solution that works for them in their culture with their varied and diverse backgrounds and experiences.
Very interesting. Peter, I have time for 2 more questions for you. You're an author of 2 books, The Untapped Team Advantage and The Toolbox Companion. Tell me, what are the key core messages in your books?
Yes. So the title of my first book is The Untapped Team Advantage. And I was looking what's the right word I want to use. Untapped, and that's really by design. I feel that teams exist in every organization, but the power of them is really untapped. I think they're kind of pretty much left to their own device, right? We talked before about we focus either on the organization or on the individual, very rarely on the team level. And I say there's so much potential there. You don't need to invest in new IT or technologies. Your team is there, but do you get the best, the maximum out of your team? Now, both in terms of performance, but also in terms of engagement. And I think the team is really the best context or subunit to deliver that, to deliver both performance and engagement. So that's why I call this the untapped team advantage, because it's almost there. And if we put some effort and attention on it, I think we can make a lot of difference. Then the second book came a few years later, because we started to run the program, and with, I would say, a pretty good success. And people are always hungry for more tools, right? So, okay, but how can we improve when somebody asking for help. I just gave you an example. So I decided to write a book, and I called it Toolbox, because it's really that. It's for all these elements that are part of team psychological safety, these 7 elements, different tools that, again, I've collected along the years. I have used some of them, I've used a lot, some a bit less, but a set of tools that practitioners could look up and maybe find something that they can implement with their team as a way to get started. Because as we said earlier, the tool is there to get started. Then it has to become the team's tool. The team has to use it on a regular basis, not just one-off in some sort of workshop session. So that's my 2 books that I'm very happy that I published them in the last years.
And congratulations for your books. And my last question for you, Peter, how do you see the future of work evolving when it comes to trust and safety, or team trust and safety?
Well, thank you for that second clarification, because very often when I'm asked about the future of work, people talk about AI and all that. Great stuff, AI. I use AI like everybody else. But here's the but. I think the key is exactly in that, is that I think in the past, we've all had teams, we kind of left them to their own device. I think in the future, we can add all the technologies we want, and AI and who knows what else will be around, but it's still about people. Yeah. It's still about people to work together, to connect, and to deliver performance, to deliver innovation, and to create engagement. And so for me, that's exactly the future. We've only started to really make teams. And like you mentioned in the very beginning, today we talk about team coaching as just an example. 15 years ago, nobody talked about team coaching. Okay. So it is changing, but we're still just starting to put the team at the level it needs to be, and to support it in the way that it needs to be supported to really deliver performance and innovation and engagement for the organization.
Wow. And on that note, Peter, I just want to say what an amazing conversation this has been. Thank you for speaking to me about TEAM.AS.ONE. We covered some very fascinating ground on psychological safety of team, culture of teams, and of course, you spoke to me about your program, Team Psychological Safety Certified Practitioner Program, and finally, both your books. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.